Andrew Yang has really caused a stir as of late in a good way. I believe that as soon as he came out and announced the Forward Party, what I always pay attention to, as I'm sure you do, is how does corporate media handle it? And if immediately corporate media decides that, oh, we have to smear the hell out of this person, that means that what they're doing is the right thing. And so the fact that his focus is, look, we're not going to have an established party for a while, but if we focus on ranked choice voting and open primaries,
Yeah.
I think we can get a lot of people interested in this whole concept. The only thing that I think will prevent this from really taking off like a rocket ship is whether or not he's willing to abstain, from taking corporate special interest money. But aside from that, I just think that the whole concept of forming a third party really rests on the idea of credibility. With all due respect to the people in the Movement for the People's Party and the Libertarian Party, whatever, I think that Andrew has a lot of credibility. And I think the fact that you're already seeing not just yourself, but you've got Mark Cuban, probably somebody like a Joe Rogan or a Dave Chappelle might jump on board. I think the whole concept of the influencers is how this is going to grow. What are your thoughts on the party overall and the sustainability of it really turning into something big?
Yeah, I think he's on the right track for sure. I'm a big, I mean, so about a year and a half ago, or I'm supposed to write a book at some point, but I don't know when I'm going to find the time. I don't know how people write books. I'm like, do they have somebody actually write the book for them?
And Andrew audiology narrated his own too.
Yeah, I just don't know. I guess I'll find, I don't know how all these people have the time maybe I'm just lazy. That's probably it, but I'm supposed to write a book. So I was this was like a year and a half, 2 years ago. The idea I had for the book I was going to write was starting a third party, because obviously people are feeling very fed up with the two sides, right? Why I stopped writing the book very specifically was the more research I did on starting a third party, the more I realized it's impossible to do. And I became more and more discouraged I just became more discouraged, and I didn't want to write a book laying it all out and then in the end saying you can't do it. There's no possible way. It's just the system is set up in a way that it's rigged for the two parties, and they just will not bend, because why would they? Why would they make rules and laws and change procedure to disarm themselves? They're not going to do that. So I gave up on that. But the thing that the idea that I sort of, right before I gave up, the idea that I came to was, I think the only way to do it is if you can infiltrate both sides. So you'd have to stay on the party tickets. You'd have to remain Democrat. You'd have to remain Republican. But you could create, and what I was calling it at the time was like the new bull moose, right? Was what it's kind of, I'm big on the bull moose party.
My favorite president.
His favorite.
Yeah, me too. And, I don't like his war stuff, but at the time, it was a different era. They didn't have the military industrial complex back then like we do now. I mean, it was a different time, a bit of a different time frame. So, although they were still pretty imperialistic, right? They loved to go around and conquer.
A lot of natives would probably not be so thrilled with that. With him.
History. Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, it's totally. So, but besides that stuff, he was definitely my favorite as well. So I wanted to start this like new bull moose. And I thought, well, what you could do is maybe you could certify candidates on both sides who are this new bull moose. And then they would get in there and they would ultimately infiltrate by gathering together from both sides of the aisle and making these changes that are necessary that would allow us finally to actually take our democracy back, like handing it back to the people, but they'd have to work together on both sides. But then I thought, there are challenges to that. The establishment wings of both sides will crush those candidates, right? They will work very hard to get rid of those people. So there's still a lot of issues with it, but I ultimately gave up on it. Andrew Yang, when he came out and he mentioned he was leaving the Democratic Party, and he says, I've got this forward party idea. I didn't know I thought, okay, it's going to be like UBI, right? It's going to have like his ideas baked into it. And it's going to be another third party, like the People's Party or whatever people come up with, that ultimately is not a good idea in my mind. And when I read his platform, though, and it was just really hyper focused on changing the voting, ranked choice voting and open primaries, and really that's the main focus. There's other things on it. And I actually think he should ditch pretty much everything else in it. I think he should hyper focus on this one thing. and I'm meeting with him actually in like an hour. So I'll tell him, hey, man, I think you should ditch everything else because it's not important and it's divisive. And the thing you've got to do is get people on both sides of the aisle on board with this one thing, right? Get everybody on board with this one idea. And, his focus is on this voting thing. And I just thought, this is it. This is the only way. I mean, look, I am really, I really want Medicare for all. I really want to get money out of politics. I really want to, change. There's a lot of things I want to make change on, but we can't even get to the table right now. We can't even get to the table. They have rigged the system so fiercely that there is no way to get our candidates, the ones that we want, real people who actually do want to represent the average person, don't even have a shot, because of the way our first past the post voting system is. That they can just, and with having closed primaries, you end up with these radical candidates, and then they're the ones that are funded by the big money interests, and they could just outcompete, and then we end up with these hyper radical or hyper bought off candidates. And there's got to be. Now I don't know, and I don't think I don't think that this is like the end all be all ranked choice voting and open primaries. I don't think that solves it, but I think it's the absolute necessary first step. I would love to. For me, the biggest issue is money in politics.
I was going to say his democracy dollars plan would also go well with this in terms of, and again, I believe in publicly financed elections. So,
right.
So I look at democracy dollars as this sort of like stopgap situation, kind of like how I see term limits. It's like based on the current system we have, this might be the best way to sort of address these issues. And I think that would be great too, because that idea of people being completely powerless is a big issue.
It's just not popular on both sides of the aisle. That's the problem with it. So I agree with you on democracy dollars. I do think that elections should be publicly financed. But for some reason, there is still that mentality on the more conservative side of the aisle where people just don't want tax dollars to go to anything. So we kind of have to balance that a little bit. I would say I would start with ranked choice voting and open primaries. And then from there, I would move towards, I think right now what everybody can agree on is strengthening the election system, right? Like changing, something's got to give with the way we run our elections. And both sides might have a slightly different viewpoint on what that thing should be, although not really. The left was saying for the longest time, we need to strengthen them because they're rigged. And then the right now is saying we need to strengthen them because they're rigged. And then the left says, shut up, but then now I see headline after headline of them saying, no, by the way, but if Trump wins in 2024, it's rigged. And it's like, oh, okay.
So well, they just do it when it suits.
Yeah, both sides do.
It's ridiculous, and both sides are kind of one side. That's
right.
The problem. And I think Peter and I talk about this all the time on the show, that our concept of both sides, or what we're referring to as sides, coming together and agreeing is a labor movement. When you have working people coming together. And I think that, I don't know what Andrew's intentions are really with this, but when you're talking about universalizing issues, labor is what's universalizing
right.
for both sides of the aisle. And so I don't know how to incorporate that, but that's how I see there being any success with a third party.
Right.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.